Hola, hola, and welcome to Cultura en Cash. This is Gigi, your host. I am a influencer, financial educator, speaker, and author of the award winning book Cultura en Cash. First, sorry for being MIA with this podcast. To be honest, out of all the things that are on my plate, this is the last in priority. I love doing it, but when life happens, it just kind of happens to fall back on the back burner. So, yeah, I mean, I mentioned in the last podcast I lost Bailey. The grief really hit me the rest of February. Then in March, I had some travel as well as some medical issues that I was dealing with. And my husband had surgery twice. It was minor, but still, a lot of time away from work because of that. And then on top of that, I was moving, which that's what this episode is about today. My big update and where I moved to. In my last episode, I had teased I was leaving Chicago, but I was not able to say where to. This episode is where I'm spilling all the tea on how we are moving or moved to Spain. But first, let me do some quick housekeeping. First, I want to thank you all to everybody who came out to the Los Angeles Times Festival of Books. I had such a good time. It was my first time being at the festival, and I'm so glad I was a part of it. I actually delayed my move to Spain to attend the festival because I had actually already booked one-way tickets for April 23rd. And then I was contacted by the festival, and the event was going to be April 26th. And I'm like, do I just go on with my plans or do I wait and go to the festival? And I'm really glad I went because it was really cool. I met really amazing people. I met a bunch of readers. I got to give everybody hugs. And then afterwards, I went to dinner with my family, which was nice. My family doesn't usually go to any of my professional events, so it was nice to have them there. Second, Austin, Texas. It's happening. It's happening on Thursday, May 29th. Probably in the evening between 6 to 8 p.m. I will be at Vintage Bookstore and Wine Bar. We are still working out the details. The tickets are still not up for sale, but they will be soon. But in the meantime, just mark your calendar. This is my only Texas stop in the foreseeable future. I'm already in talks for speaking events in the fall, and honestly, nothing has come up in Texas. So if you're in the neighboring area, please come on by, make a trip out of it, because I don't know that I'll be in Houston or Dallas or anywhere else in Texas, at least this year, maybe next year. But for this year, it's looking like just Austin. All right, so let's get into this episode's content, which again is how we have officially moved to Spain. I didn't want to say where yet because there were still a lot of moving pieces. We were still waiting on our visa to get approved. Now that's done, we sold or gave away or gifted away most of our stuff in Chicago, and we packed 3 suitcases each and a backpack and moved to Spain. I've been here almost a week with my husband. We're currently staying at an Airbnb until we figure out long-term housing. So yeah, it's a big life change, and I wanted to share with you what went into the decision-making process, and I wanted to answer some frequently asked questions that I've been asked from close friends and family that have known for months about this decision, just for anybody who's curious about maybe doing something like this in the future or just what life will look like for me moving forward. First, I do want to address I did not move to another country because of Trump, because that's immediately the first question. Is it because of Trump? Obviously, he wasn't making it easy for me to stay in the US, but the decision to move abroad has been 6 years in the making, and I have receipts. So I want to answer the 4 most frequently asked questions that I get, and then I'm going to dive into some newsletter community questions that I received, because I actually made this announcement in April, early April, to my newsletter community. So if you are not in my newsletter community, sign up by going to my website, thefirstgenmentor.com, or you can go to the link in bio on my TikTok or my Instagram or even my LinkedIn to add yourself to the newsletter there. That way you can get advanced news like this or access to exclusive giveaways or discounts or anything fun that's exclusive for the newsletter community. So the number one question that I get is why? Why are you leaving? Why are you going abroad? And if you read Cultura en Cash, you won't be surprised to hear that I am now taking my business and moving abroad. Why? Because I mentioned this in the budgeting chapter. I mentioned in chapter 4 that me speaking to a class of high school students from my old high school and telling them how my biggest regret was not studying abroad, and telling them over and over, like, do it, don't make the same mistake I did. That made me kind of reflect on, is that opportunity over for me? Will I ever get to experience and immerse myself abroad? And that's when the dream started back in 2019. So I've been planning on it for a while, for years. So again, Trump does not help, but it's definitely a factor. I can't say that it's not. But yeah, it's been a long time in the making. And again, like I mentioned in the book, I had saved 2/3 of my goal to go on a mid-career sabbatical, and then COVID hit. And there was no end to COVID in sight. So I decided to use the money I was saving for my sabbatical to start my business, The First Gen Mentor, instead. And it's been frustrating as travel restrictions were lifted, and I could have had the ability to move sooner. I couldn't because I still had to work on my career. I wasn't going to go when I was still in the middle of writing my book, because I knew I had to establish my career, my brand, my presence in the US first. And I've done that now. I've done that. The book launched in 2024. So yeah, last year, going on a year and a half. I've done a bunch of speaking work, TV, collaborations, podcasts. So I've done the work to establish myself as an in-demand speaker, and now I'm able to take my work abroad with me. And I'll talk more about that later. But that is one of the answers to the question of why. There's also other factors, like just wanting a slower lifestyle, wanting to immerse myself in a Spanish speaking country so I can improve my Spanish speaking skills. There's a lot, and I can do a separate episode about that. But the number one reason is for sure because it's my biggest regret for not studying abroad in college, and now still having that itch to want to experience life abroad. All right, the second and most common question I get asked is, okay, so you told us why, but why Spain? Why not somewhere else? Why not Mexico? Why not France, right? The reason I chose Spain is because there is no language barrier. Obviously, the Spanish that they speak here, it's a little different, just like any other Spanish in any other Spanish-speaking country, right? Like the Spanish in Puerto Rico is not exactly the same as the Spanish in Mexico or the Dominican Republic. Argentinian Spanish is very different, right? So, but it's at the base, it's still pretty similar, right, with Spanish. So I knew that would make the transition easier. Another reason we chose Spain is because we've been here before. We actually were here for 2 weeks for our honeymoon in 2023. And we spent most of our time in the south of Spain, and we really liked it here. We're like, oh, we can kind of see ourselves living here as a potential moving abroad country for us. And we've been to Barcelona before that and thought Barcelona was beautiful too. And then the biggest reason, honestly, for choosing Spain instead of another country was because Spain does have a pathway to citizenship for citizens of former colonies of Spain. So I am a citizen of Mexico. If you follow me on Instagram stories, I posted a lot, and I actually have a highlight reel about the process of me not seeking dual citizenship, because I've had dual citizenship since I was 17, but the process of me applying for my credencial de lector, which is basically your Mexican voter ID as well as a Mexican passport. So I dealt with a lot of that through the Chicago consulate. I also went in person in Mexico to get the voter ID. It was a lot of time, not money, because I would say it wasn't an expensive process, but it was time and setting up the appointments in advance and going and having to wait, a big time investment in getting these documents together. And because Spain has that pathway to citizenship, it's an attractive country for us. And I'll go more into that in this next question, because the third most commonly asked question is, okay, how long? How long will you be in Spain? And to give you more insight, the visa that we were approved for is called a digital nomad visa, and we got it for 3 years. So we plan to be here at least 3 years. I should say, I can pursue Spanish citizenship after 2 years. So remember, I just mentioned that there's a pathway to citizenship for citizens of former Spanish colonies. So think of most of Latin America, including the Philippines, right? Because they were also colonized by Spain. If you are a national of any of those countries and you meet the 2 year residency requirements, so you're legally here in Spain, and then you can apply for citizenship after 2 years as opposed to 10 years if you just hold, let's say, like American citizenship or just British citizenship. So this is definitely one of those situations that I feel very thankful. I know I talk a lot about the challenges of being first gen, but this is one of the benefits of being first gen, that I am so tied to the immigrant experience that both my parents are Mexican nationals. So it was very easy for them to get my dual citizenship when I was a teenager. And for me, even to navigate Mexican bureaucracy the last 2-3 years to be able to get all my ducks in a row. So yeah, that's really attractive to me, to be able to pursue Spanish citizenship after 2 years. And people are like, well, why do you want Spanish citizenship? Spain is a part of the EU. And then once you have entry or citizenship in one of the countries, you basically have access to the rest of the EU. So you can travel or work or live in any of the other EU countries with no restriction. So that's just really attractive to have those options. And then people are like, okay, so are you staying here forever? Honestly, I don't know. All the research that I've done of people that have moved abroad, they usually don't go back to the States. I don't know if that's our case. If it were up to me, I would say we're not going back. But I don't know. We never know what the world has in store for us. So I do want to take this time to acknowledge the privilege, right, in having those options. Because I know right now, especially in the current climate, the undocumented community is having a hard time with the Trump administration. And I know that it might sound a little out of touch for me to be talking about having the financial freedom, the work freedom, and having the paperwork to be able to leave the Trump presidency and go somewhere else. But I don't want to chalk it all up to privilege. I think it can be both and, right? So a little bit of privilege, but also a lot of planning, a lot of sacrifice. Again, 6 years in the making. This privilege is when you're able to decide from one day to another, oh, I'm leaving because Trump is in presidency, like Rosie O'Donnell did, and she went to Ireland. I don't know if you guys know about that. But yeah, for me to have been doing this for 6 years, it took a lot more time and effort than it took privilege. But I do want to acknowledge that for people that don't have the option, that I see you and I feel for you, and I'm sorry that that's your situation. And I'm sorry that this administration is just making everybody's life more difficult, everybody. And it's something I want to say too. People are like, oh, it's so cool that you get to escape Trump's presidency. And I'm like, I really don't. I'm still an American citizen. It's very hard to denounce your American citizenship, and I don't want to denounce it. I am American, born and raised. Also, I will still work in the U.S., which I'll talk more about that. And all my friends and family, mostly friends, because most of my family's in Mexico, but most of the people I love are in the U.S. So it's not like I just get to detach myself and be in a bubble. I'm still very invested in how things pan out in the States. But we're all connected, honestly. Like it's a global world. Like everybody's connected. If something happens to the U.S., it affects the rest of the world. So it's all connected. But having a little distance definitely helps. And then question number 4 of the most frequently asked questions, and then I'll get into questions from my newsletter community, was, will you work for a company in Spain? And this one always kind of makes me laugh because it just makes me realize that people still don't realize what I do for a living, including family. Like my grandma, I have this discussion with my dad, several people that are just like, so you're going to go work in Spain for like a Target in Spain? Or like, and I'm like, no, first of all, there's no Target in Spain. Second of all, the visa that I have dictates what kind of work I am allowed to do in the country, right? So because it's a digital nomad visa, I'm telling the Spanish government that I am coming here self-employed. that I am, and that it's important for them to know because they have a very high unemployment rate. So any jobs that they do have in Spain are prioritized for Spanish citizens. Then, second in priority are other EU citizens. Then, after that, it would be immigrants that would have to prove that they're highly qualified and that no Spanish citizen or any EU citizen was able to do the job, and that's why they had to hire an immigrant. So, usually, those are just for jobs that are extremely high skilled, which wouldn't be the case, right? So no, I am not coming here and applying for work. Thankfully, I am self-employed. It is not easy to own your own business. I'm going on 4 years now of being self-employed and working for myself. So I was approved as a digital nomad, and because I'm married, I do get to bring a dependent with me. If I had children, I would be able to bring my children as dependents. The income requirements increase the more people that you bring with you, obviously, right? Because you need more money to sustain yourself. So it's just me and my husband. So yeah, we met the income requirements and passed the FBI check, all the things and there's a whole list, by the way, and that's the separate episode too for anybody that's interested on all the things, the documents that I had to put together. It wasn't just like one application. We actually work with an attorney because it's a very extensive process. But with this digital nomad visa, I'm actually only allowed to make 20% of my income in Spain. So if I want to pick up a side hustle being, I don't know, like an Uber Eats driver, which there's a lot here, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of fun to just be like driving around in scooters. I could do that, but only 20% of my income could be that. But the rest of my money, of my income has to be generated abroad. So what I do for work is I work as an influencer. So I do paid ads for companies that I support on my TikTok channel or my Instagram channel or LinkedIn. And I also get paid to be a financial educator, whether that's in person in events in the US or remotely. So that's how I will continue to make money while living abroad. All right, so now some questions from my community. This first one is from Daisy. Daisy says, your news to moving to Spain is empowering and inspiring. I hope one day to follow your lead. Would love to learn more about the process, roadmap, and first steps in planning. Daisy, congrats. That's how it all starts, right? Just like in thinking about it and considering it. I'm really thankful for this journey. I know I just got here, but I still pinch myself that I'm like, wow, it took so many years, but it happened. It happened. I stuck to my goal. I had some delays along the way, but I'm finally here living a life of my design. So some quick tips I would say is first get clear on your vision. For me, I didn't know that Spain was going to be my destination. I knew it would be somewhere in Europe. I actually first had my eye on Italy, and I've had Italy as my screensaver on my computer and on my phone for years to kind of keep that dream alive. I also started learning Italian. So yeah, get clear on what part of the world area you'd like to be in to kind of help keep that dream alive. Second, organize your money. A lot of people move here with debt, with little savings. You can still do it, but it'll definitely be harder. It's a lot easier when you come with no debt. You have some savings to your names. You have retirement, and you have retirement money for the future. So definitely recommend getting that under control before doing a big transition like this. Although, like I said, people move with debt all the time, but it's just an additional expense you don't want to have to worry about. Third, declutter and avoid big purchases. The whole time that I was in Chicago, which is 3 years, we did not have a car. And there were times when we missed having a car. I mean, we're from California, so we've always had cars. You need cars to get around. But we always knew, no, if we get a car, then that's going to be one more thing to have to get rid of when we decide to move abroad. So we were carless for those 3 years. Plus, the public transportation system in Chicago really is great. So you can get by fine without a car. But there were definitely times where we're like, oh, we wish we had a car right now. We didn't have to wait for an Uber or this and that. Fourth, get your documents right. These things take time to process. When I first started the process, I wasn't aware that I would need my Mexican passport to apply. Actually, let me take that back. You can apply for this visa with your let's say, US passport. For me, because my long-term goal is to apply for citizenship, it was important for me to apply with my Mexican passport. So I had to go through the process of getting my credencial, because you can't get your passport without your credencial, and then applying for my passport at the Chicago consulate. So these all took months, years to happen. I could have gone the credencial at the consulate, but some people were like, it's sketchier and you won't get any questions if you do it in Mexico. So one time I went, I forgot my birth certificate. I showed them a digital copy. They're like, nope, we need the physical one. So I had to go back 6 months later because that's the next time I was going to be in the city. It was a hot day, had to be outside waiting. So I got that probably maybe July of 2022. Sounds about right. 2022. I'm lying. 2023. And then I got my passport, my Mexican passport, with the Chicago consulate, which is great, by the way, in the next year, summer of 2024. So like I said, it doesn't have to take that long. I could have moved faster, but obviously I had other priorities. Hello, a book launch and other things going on. But it does take time. It doesn't happen from one day to the next. So if that's something that you're interested in too, I would definitely recommend in getting started with that. And my friend Anna Powwow, that's her handle on Instagram. She has an amazing highlight reel as well about what she did in New York City to pursue dual citizenship. Because people ask me, oh, wait, can you kind of guide me on what you did for dual citizenship? Unfortunately, I can't because my parents did that for me when I was a teenager. So I actually skipped that step. So it would be dual citizenship, then your credencial, then your passport. So I had to do the last two steps on my own while juggling having my own business, having a husband, having a sick dog, everything that I've had to do, right? And then after you get your documents in order, I would then start learning about the visa options. And I save this step for last because visas change all the time. Some visas get gutted and they completely disappear. This digital nomad visa didn't actually get rolled out until 2 years ago. It didn't even exist when I started planning for this in 2019. So like I said, visa immigration laws are always changing. So a good way to kind of keep pulse of what's going on is an amazing resource. This is a page ran by my friend Seppi. It's called She Hit Refresh. That's the handle on both Instagram and TikTok. It's an amazing community. I've been with it since the beginning of 2019, and she actually has a book that she wrote on visa guides. She has courses. It's my go-to source for anything about life abroad as an American. And Vanessa from Wander Onwards is amazing too. She has some really cool content. Also, for context, Seppi is in Spain and Vanessa is in Germany. So they have different lens, right, of Americans living abroad. So instead of like Emily in Paris, right, it's like Seppi in Spain and Vanessa in Germany. So those would be my quick tips there. Again, happy to talk more if I see that people are really curious about this topic. Ooh, I do want to say, people are like, oh, are you going to start making content about this on TikTok or Instagram? Honestly, I don't think so. I'd like to keep my pages about the first gen experience and money. It's raining. I might mention it, make a video here or there, but the podcast will definitely be the space for that. And why is that? Because I don't want to be a go-to source for moving abroad. Number one, I don't have the expertise. I'm figuring it out myself. I'm leaning on other experts to do it. And number two, I like what I do, which is staying in my lane and talking about using money as a tool to enrich your life. So if you are interested in more of that content, I'm happy to bring it to you via podcast format or also in the newsletters, so make sure you join the newsletter community. Thanks for your question, Daisy. Now we're going to move on to Miriam's question. Miriam says, I'm curious why you chose Spain for your new home. I've heard that folks who have reached a certain level of financial freedom move to Europe. Locally in Oregon, where I live, people are moving to Portugal. Will you still be doing in-person events in the U.S.? How's the process going to translate the book in Spanish? All right. Thanks, Miriam, for the questions. There's a couple questions here, so let's break them up. So first, when she asked why you chose Spain, I already talked about that, right? About how I want to improve my Spanish. I like the weather, the culture here, the food, and there's a pathway to citizenship. So to be able to stay here long term. So that's why Spain was chosen. And then she mentions, I've heard that folks who have reached a certain level of financial freedom can move to Europe. Yes. So if you have financial freedom, meaning you no longer have to work for money, you do have an easier time getting a visa to move abroad. Obviously, it depends on your criminal background, on the visa, the country that you're immigrating from. There's a lot of factors, but generally speaking, if you have financial independence and you can prove that you have passive income to sustain yourself, you will typically have an easier time moving abroad. And that is because, again, you're not taking a job from a local, and two, they get to tax you, right? So these governments aren't offering these visas because they want to like welcome foreigners in. It's number one, a tax issue. They want more tax revenue, right? And as a new immigrant in this country, I will be pouring my money into this community, right? So I'll be doing my grocery shopping here. I'll be going to the dentist here. So I'm pouring into this economy as opposed to when I'm living in the United States and spending my money in the US, right? So then she mentions that a lot of people that she knows in Oregon are moving to Portugal. I'm not surprised to hear that. From what I understand, Portugal is very attractive to new immigrants because of the ease of obtaining something like a digital nomad visa. And I also know that it's a lot more tax friendly than Spain is. I definitely considered Portugal for those reasons, but I don't speak Portuguese, nor am I interested in learning it. So, and I've never been to Portugal either, although I've heard it's beautiful. But again, because I've been to Spain, because I speak Spanish, it just seemed like a more natural choice to me. And then her question about, will you still be doing in-person events in the US? Yes, so I will elaborate. So I mentioned that I earn money as an influencer, but also as a speaker. A lot of my in-person work, especially now post-book, is usually during these high seasons of the fall during Hispanic Heritage Month and the spring during Financial Literacy Month in April. So I have very, very busy periods during those months. And the rest of the year, I'm usually pretty quiet, which is good because then I can focus on other projects or on creating free content or recording the podcast, right? But like April, that's why there was no podcast episode out because there's just a lot. Well, and the move, all the moving pieces with the move did not help. But yeah, usually I'm traveling a lot and it can be difficult to kind of juggle everything in those high season months. So what I plan to do is be stateside for those high season months. So again, Hispanic Heritage Month and Financial Literacy Month. I will still go to the US for opportunities that make sense. So any potential clients that are listening, hey, DM me, fill out an interest form. But yeah, I'm not completely closed off from doing in-person events in the US during, say, my off season, but I will definitely be more selective because hello, it's going to be a very long flight, right? It's no longer a 2-3 hour flight to get across the country. It's now a transatlantic flight. It's going to be a hassle. So it has to make sense. So for example, right now it's May, Cinco de Mayo, by the way. I will be in Texas, as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, later this month. I will be there to be a keynote speaker for a foundation that I admire, and I am also extending my time there to finally add the very requested Texas book tour stop. So I'm going. Did I necessarily want to travel and go outside the country a month after moving here? No, I didn't. But it made sense because, again, it's an organization that I really respect, and I really wanted to visit Texas for a book tour stop. So if other opportunities come along like that where it makes sense, financially, where it makes sense organization-wise, location-wise, then yes, I will make an exception. But for the majority of the time, I will be Spain-based and doing work remotely, and then we'll only be in the U.S. during those high seasons of Hispanic Heritage Month and Financial Literacy Month. This is more of just a note from Eduardo. Looking forward to hearing all the details behind his decision. Hey, Eduardo, hope you got a chance to listen to the podcast. Anna asks, I wanted to ask you about the implications on retirement disbursements when you live outside the U.S. I already love this question. If you hit retirement age and are still living abroad, can you still access your retirement accounts, and will you have to pay U.S. taxes in that income if you don't live in the U.S. anymore? I'd love to retire somewhere in Latin America, but I wonder if I'll have issues accessing my money. Great question. Very valid question. Yes. So your money is still yours. You're still able to access your money if you retire in the US or if you retire in China. It's still your money. But I think your question is more about taxes, right? And yes, it still will be subject to taxes. I am not a tax expert, especially when it comes to global taxes. So it's definitely best to consult with a tax lawyer in both countries that you are interested. So in the US, and then whatever Latin American country you're interested in moving to see how things would be taxed abroad. Another common question is, oh, do I still get access to my Social Security? Technically, you do. You are, but who knows, right? Social Security will be around when we are of age. But yeah, there's plenty of people that live abroad and are able to collect their Social Security check. As a matter of fact, a lot of Americans have to move abroad because they can't afford to retire in the US. So it's much more affordable to retire outside of the US and live off their Social Security income. And then let's see. So yeah, so again, my recommendation there would be to consult with the tax lawyer in both countries, and also to work with the financial planner to see what sort of investment vehicles you should be putting your money into. And I say that because, for example, I always prioritize putting money into a Roth IRA, because when you pull the money out in retirement, you no longer pay taxes, right? Because you paid them up front. Well, guess what? In Spain, they will still tax you. Spain is still going to tax you on Roth money. For me, that's a problem for Giovanna in 30 years. So it's not something that's front of mind right now, but it's definitely something I'm like, I wish I would have known about this sooner, right? And maybe put less money in my Roth and more in my 401k or something like that. So the other common question is, are you going to be taxed twice? There's tax treaties with a lot of countries. So I know with the U.S. and Spain, the U.S. takes into account how much, first you pay taxes in Spain, and then the U.S. takes into account how much you paid in taxes to Spain. And then if the U.S. still feels that you owe taxes, then they will charge you the difference or whatnot. But so that's supposed to prevent double taxation, from what I understand. I don't know that that treaty exists with every country. So again, that's why it's important to talk to the professionals, a tax or an immigration lawyer that can help with that. All right. And the last question is from MJ. MJ asks, I wanted to ask about your move to Spain, specifically how you are going about having status in Spain. I've heard of the digital nomad visa, which is what I have, and also the non-lucrative visa. I travel for a month in Spain in December with my husband and 2 young kids, and I'd love to go back for a longer time period. I happened to recently listen to an episode of the Mile High FI, which I'm assuming Financial Independence podcast, with a woman named Susie, who goes back and forth to Spain with her family on a non-lucrative visa. And then I saw your email a few days later. The universe is trying to tell me something about going to Spain. Very cool, very cool. And yes, I would agree. I would agree that the universe is trying to tell you something. So the non-lucrative visa, to my understanding, that's when you have passive income, right? So either you have rental properties that are able to pay you enough to fund your lifestyle, or maybe you have a business. Maybe you have investments. So again, you have some sort of pension or retirement investments that you're able to draw money from, and you no longer have to work. Non-lucrative is for people that no longer have to work. So it sounds like this person, probably has some sort of passive income. So she has that flexibility to be able to go back and forth to the US. That's amazing. I wish I didn't have to work anymore, but I still have a ways until I can retire. So that's why the visa that I qualified for was a digital nomad visa, where I work for myself but earn my income abroad. So let's see here. In any case, I would love to hear more about navigating the whole status question on your upcoming podcast on this. So yes, so again, to clarify, there's many visas that you can use to immigrate to a new country. I know specifically for Spain, you can apply for a student visa if you want to go for an undergraduate degree or a master's degree. You can apply for a digital nomad visa like I did. If you have a business, I think it has to have been, like, you can't open, like, let's say a jewelry business today and then apply for the digital nomad visa tomorrow. You have to have a functioning business, I believe, for either 3 years or 1 year. It's a year at least. It also has to make a certain income threshold. You have to be able to prove that it's a real business with real expenses, real inflows. and that it's stable, right? That it's stable, a stable business with cash flow. So that is how I'm able to enter the country and stay beyond the 90 days that Americans are typically allowed to stay in Europe. And then for anybody that's curious, what about my husband? Is he going to be just like a stay-at-home dad now, dad of non-existent children and now non-existent dog? No, he's working too, and that was a big factor. And again, that's been part of the long-term planning that we've done. So my husband works a traditional W-2 job. He works for an international company that has a Spanish subsidiary. So he's been with them 3 years, and he asked for an international transfer. And they're great. He has a great rapport with them, and they were able to accommodate him. So that's been really helpful, especially when it's not just me in the equation, but a partner, right, or a second person. You want to make sure that that person's still able to either work or work remotely. So my husband has worked remotely for 3 years for this company. And luckily they were able to help with the transfer. They did not help with the visa or relocation costs, which we had to eat all those costs. And it makes sense. We're the ones that were seeking this, right? Let's say he would have gone a promotion to the Spanish office for whatever reason, and his role required him to be in Spain. Then it would have made sense. They would have paid for the visa for both me and him, and then our relocation costs for the move. But they were helpful in transferring his job to the Spanish subsidiary, which is tremendous help because he continues to bring in income, and I will continue to bring in income as a self-employed financial educator. So I hope that's helpful. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it on IG stories, tag me at Gigi the First Gen Mentor, and I'll show you some love. And if you have any more questions about this transition or the possibility of moving abroad, again, I am not an expert. I would refer you to Seppi from Should Have Refresh or Vanessa from Wander Onwards. But I am happy to share more about my experience with this. Something I'd love to dive into is my family's reaction to me moving abroad, whether they were supportive or whether they had negative things to say. Teaser, a little bit of both. Some of the weird comments I've gotten, some interesting observations already, and just the ways that Spanish operates very differently than U.S. culture and everyday life. For example, I went to the bank to try to open a bank account, and they're like, oh, you need an appointment. So you can't just walk in. Like, in the U.S., you can walk to Chase and just walk in and, oh, hi, I want to open a bank account. And there'll be like 5 people ready to help you. At this location, they only accept you by appointment, and it has to be booked out. So it's not like same day appointment. So yeah, definitely interesting to see how it's just a slower pace here. And I like it. Honestly, I've been grinding for 4 years now, since the inception of my business, a First Gen Mentor. So I'm proud to be in a place where I can kind of scale back and focus a little bit more on my quality of life, focus on my health, my mental health as well, and on spending quality time with the people that I love. So again, if you have any more questions about that, happy to make future episodes about the transition. Just feel free to email me at my email, which is hi@thefirstgenmentor.com. Thanks for listening. Hasta la próxima, and see you next Money Monday.